2 strategies to maintain your confidence even in the face of pageant critics. Hey there, welcome back to the Win a Pageant podcast. I'm your coach, Alycia Darby, and today I want to give you 2 very specific strategies that can help maintain your confidence about competing in a pageant, even when you've got naysayers saying all the crazy stuff like, why would you compete in a pageant? Aren't you too old? All that stuff. Now listen, if you've been competing in pageants long enough, you've heard this same stuff too, right? You tell your boss or your barista or whatever, your second cousin, that you're competing in a pageant, and all of a sudden they've got an opinion. It's often an uneducated, over-opinionated opinion, but they're like, really? A pageant? Aren't you too old for that? Or they might say something like, aren't pageants for kids? Or, oh, a pageant, you? Okay, now, especially my Ms. and Mrs. contestants, you are more susceptible to this kind of uneducated judgment because people have stereotypes in their minds about what pageants are. Now, it's basically never going to happen from somebody who actually knows a thing or two about pageants, because we know the impact that you can have. We know the transformational experience that competing in a pageant can really bring to a woman of any age. We know that there are pageants for every size, for every shape of a woman, for every age of a woman. There are literally pageants for everybody. And we know that because we're in the pageant industry, but not everybody knows that. And those people are the ones that chip away over time at your confidence. So I want to give you 2 strategies that you can employ in order to silence those lies from the enemy and instead chase the dream that God has given you. Strategy number 1. Now, this strategy is called reframing. You may have heard of this before. It's very common in self-help and self-development. To reframe something is to basically look at it in a different way. And by reframing it in a different way, you see it in a different way too, okay? It's like reframing a photo. It can change the picture entirely, right? So what I want you to consider is reframing your pageant competition, though you're running for a title that will represent your community or state or nation. And I want you to reframe it as, instead of telling people that you are competing in a pageant, imagine what would change if you told them that you were running for public office. Right? Now, if you told your boss or barista or your second cousin those types of things, now instead of them being flooded with their uneducated stereotypes about pageantry, they will instead be flooded with their uneducated stereotypes about political office, okay? So if you're like, well, I'm going to be running for office soon, or, oh, I'm going to be running for a public position in August or whatever, they're going to be like, oh, now there's a whole different level of respect, right? And a completely different view. Now, I wrote down a few things I want to share with you. How similar running for public office is to competing in a pageant. You might be blown away, okay? Here are some of the similarities that I came up with. All right, number 1. Politicians have campaigns that they run on, and it's very similar to pageant platforms. In fact, often even in politics, it's called a political platform. That's what you're doing in pageantry, okay? Or a legacy project, something that you've been doing for a while. And a politician may also have a legacy project, okay? Number 2, they support and speak for a group of people. That is exactly what you are doing as a pageant woman, right? When you win a pageant, you want to be speaking for a group of people. Often the people who don't have a voice themselves, which is exactly what we expect our politicians to do, right? Number 3, they have a local, state, and national levels to win. And so do you, right? Those same things are happening in pageantry. They also get voted into position. So do you. Your constituents are different, right? The people who are voting are a little bit different than a politician, but people are voting as well to vote you in. Politicians have to be mindful about their appearance, about what they wear, about their public persona. so do you as a pageant queen, right? See, it's not that different. Okay, and here's the last one. They have to prepare for very difficult conversations to come up at any time. And so do you. They do appearances all over the place. Like they're out there, attending community events and shaking hands and kissing babies. And so are you as a pageant woman. See how similar these things are? And so why is it that when a pageant woman is competing in a Mrs. pageant, all of a sudden she's get all these critics telling her she's too old, or why you, or all these things? We would never think that of a politician, right? So I want you to first reframe this as, okay, I'm actually running for public office, okay? Now maybe the votes are a little bit different and it shows up a little bit different and you get to get a little fancier than they do, but it's very, very similar. That's strategy number one. Now strategy number two is probably even more important, even though it's not always possible. And that is to plant yourself in new soil, okay? Just like a flower will bloom when it's in perfect conditions and it struggles to bloom in poor conditions, the same will be true for you no matter what you are achieving in life. If you are surrounded by people who are constantly criticizing and pulling you down instead of cheering you on and championing the things that you want to do in life, the dreams that you have, whether pageantry or otherwise, if you are stuck in bad soil with negative people, you will not achieve your potential. So what I want you to do, this is strategy number two, is replant yourself. Find good soil. Find a place where people will welcome you, where they're cheering you on. Like they're like, that's awesome, you're competing in a pageant, that's the coolest thing ever. Here's all the 20 things I'm so excited about for, right? That's what you want. That's the kind of thing. You want support. So if you are able, now listen, sometimes I understand you're not able. You're like, but this is my husband, or this is my mom that is critical of me competing, or this is my children don't really want me to. Oftentimes those things can happen, and so you can't just replant yourself. But what you can do is add good soil. So if you're unable to fully get out of the negative environment and replant yourself into a fully positive environment, what you can do is at least add good soil to the environment you're already in. And you will find that it'll be easier for you to kind of ignore the negative, the critical comments, and start to pay attention to the positive, supportive ones. Okay? Some ways to do that would be to connect with your sister queens, find opportunities and environments to get around them, attend the local pageants in your area. There are pageants in every major city in every weekend of the year, okay? So it's likely you will be able to find those sister queens by just attending other pageants, Find a coaching community. This is something that I think is so important that we constantly are developing within the Win a Pageant Academy. We're always trying to build that rich soil of community around us because I know that makes a big difference when my clients go up on stage. If they've been surrounded by good soil, they are able to bloom. And those that aren't able to bloom. So we are very wise about creating that smart community of women that are good soil. Find some good soil and get plugged in. Okay, so 2 strategies. Number 1, reframe it. Imagine it as running for public office rather than competing in a pageant, even though it's pretty much the same thing. And then second is find some good soil. And that, my dear, is how you win a pageant. I'll see you next time.